Okay, guys, welcome back to Social Studies. So today, you guys, we're going to focus on this term called manifest destiny. And really, it was, it happened probably, it didn't necessarily happen, but it was really used after the Civil War. And you can look at up here. So this was written by John L. O'Sullivan. And basically, the vocabulary words that are going to be in here are up above here. So beneficent is good. Providence, in this case, the idea of God or some divine present watching over and directing human affairs. Derived means taken from some source, and unsullied means pure or uncontaminated. So we're going to read this, and normally what I would have you guys do is if we're reading this in class, you have kind of American values and other notes. So I'd be having you take notes on this, because what you're going to do at the end here is there's going to be a little bit of writing. You're going to look at this political cartoon and then basically apply like manifest destiny to that. Okay, we kind of covered manifest destiny in class at one time. I'm sure some of you weren't in there, but we'll go ahead and read this article so you get an idea of what manifest destiny is, okay? So it says the American people have derived their origin from many other nations, and the Declaration of National Independence being entirely based on the great principle of human equality. These facts demonstrate at once our disconnected position as regards to other nation, that we have in reality but a little connection with the past history of any of them, and still less with all the antiquity, its glories, or its crimes. On the contrary, our national birth was beginning of a new history, the formation and progress of an untried political system which separates us from the past and connects us with the future, and only so far as regards the entire development of the natural rights of man in a moral, political, and national life. And we may confidently assume that our country is destined to be the great nation of basically futurity. Okay, so what that's kind of saying is our country, when we formed it, was a democracy, and really there weren't very ancient Greece to some degree was a democracy, but this was really an experiment. So after we fought the Revolutionary War and came up with our Declaration of Independence, it really was like an experiment. We didn't have a king, we had a president, but as you guys, we've talked about, the people in our country have all the power. We elect our leaders. So really all the power vests with the people. We have some goals, that all men were created equal. Some of those things are true, some aren't true. Okay, so let's go read the second paragraph. It's so destined because the principle upon which a nation is organized, fixed in its destiny, that the equality is perfect, it's universal. It presides in all operations of the physical world, but also the conscious law of the soul. Self-evident dictates the morality which accurately defines the duty of a man to man, and consequently man's right as a man. Okay. Besides, the truthful annals of any nation furnish abundant evidence that its happiness, its greatness, its duration were always proportionate to the democratic quality in the system of government. So basically what that's saying is the success of our country or the greatness were always proportionate to the democratic equality in its system of government. And that goes back to all men were created equal. The people are represented by our leaders. So these were all ideas that we had when our country was founded. Okay, and it says, what friend of human liberty, civilization, and refinement can cast his view over past history of the monarchies and aristocracies, antiquity, and not deplore that they ever existed? So the monarchy, that would be a king. So we didn't want to be like that. We didn't want like a aristocrats, those are like the rich people ruling. So when we formed our country, that's what England was like, and we wanted freedom from England. And some of the other European countries were like that too. So we wanted to get away from that. We didn't want the rich people having all the say. We didn't want a king. We elected a president. So we were trying to basically get away from that. Okay. It says, what philanthropist can contemplate the oppression, the cruelties, and injustice inflicted by the masses of mankind, not turn to moral horror from that retrospect? Okay. And what that is saying is in a lot of countries, the poor people were oppressed. The rich people had all the rights. And when we formed our country, we had this idea that everyone was created equal. It didn't always work out that way. It's still not working out that way. But that was the idea behind when we formed our country. Okay. And hopefully history, you learn from your past mistakes. And if you don't learn from, you guys have heard, many times they say you're doomed to repeat that. And that's really true. So if we haven't learned from some mistakes we made, we're never going to change and we're going to keep repeating them. Okay. So America is destined for better deeds. It's an unparalleled glory that we have no reminiscence of battlefields, but it's deference of humanity, of the oppressed of all nation, the rights of the conscious, the rights of the personal enfranchised. That means the right to vote. Our annals describe no sense of horrid carnage where men were led by hundreds of thousands to slay one another, dupes and victims to emperors, kings, nobles, demons, and humans called heroes. We have no patriots to defend our homes, our liberties, but no aspirants to crown our thrones, nor have American people ever suffered themselves to be led on wicked ambition to depopulate the land, spread the desolation far and wide. The human must be placed on a seat of supremacy. So that kind of gets back to, our leaders aren't necessarily trying to kill us, although sometimes that happens. Remember, these are just ideals. And obviously, things don't always work out as planned, but you had a plan when we formed our country, and it says we have no patriots to defend our homes. We basically are pretty free. Remember, we talked about communism where the state owns everything. In our country, you're able to have private property. You're able to have your home, and there's really no one defending it. And it talks about American people ever suffered themselves to be led on wicked ambition to depopulate the land. In some countries, obviously, they basically, maybe even Russia and China, depopulate the land. That means just kill millions of people. There were leaders that just murdered their people. That really hasn't happened so much in the United States as it has in other countries. Okay. I know this is a little bit wordy, you guys. So we have no interest of the scenes of antiquity, only as lessons of avoidance of nearly all their examples. The expansive future in our area and for our history, we are entering on its untrodden space. What this means is like moving west. So when we formed our country, those 13 colonies were mostly on the eastern seaboard. They went from Maine down to Georgia. And then we had Louisiana Purchase. We started moving west. And that was kind of the expansive future. And that's untrodden space. There weren't a lot of people living west of the Mississippi River, especially, before the Civil War. That was pretty wild. Okay. So it says, the expansive future in our area and for our history, we are entering its untrodden space with truths of God in our minds, beneficial objects in our hearts, and with a clear conscience unsullied by the past. So all the manifest destiny is, it's basically kind of, we are driven, a lot of the Americans saw it during this period, they were driven by God. And it talks about our clear conscience unsullied in the past. So we had really no idea what was going to happen in the West because we didn't know, we'd never been there. We are the nation of human progress, and who will, what can set limits to our onward march. Providence is with us, and no earthly power can. We point to the everlasting truth on the first page of our national declaration, and we proclaim that millions of other lands, that the gates of hell, the powers of aristocrats and monarchies shall not prevail against us. So the rich people aren't going to prevail against us, the kings aren't going to prevail against us, and the gates of hell are not going to prevail against us. So basically, we had all this land in the West that we had no idea, but we had this idea we were free, and basically it talks about providence is with us. If you go back up to providence here, in this case, the idea God or some divine present watching over us and directing human affairs. So it was the idea that God was going to take care of us when we're moving west. Okay. Okay. So if you don't come to democracy, democracy will come to you, and you have a plane dropping bombs. So it's kind of this idea that our way of life was better than anyone else's. And that's really what Manifest Destiny kind of is about. We started our own country, and we didn't want to be like the rest of Europe. We didn't want kings. We didn't want aristocracies where rich people were ruling us. We had this country, unlike a lot of other countries in Europe, where you had all this basically unexplored land. You think about almost half our country, maybe even 2/3 was basically, unexplored. Native Americans were living there, but for the most part, there were wide open spaces. The Oregon Trail, that was really exploring the West. Because our country, when the colonies settled, if you saw the map, it was only on the eastern seaboard. So like I said, almost 2/3 of our country was, unexplored. So that's kind of this idea that we're going to move westward, and, we're going to be taken care of. A lot of people obviously came here for religious freedom. So there were a lot of people that really believed in a God, and they really thought God was looking over them. And if then we go back up to these words up here, this vocabulary words, unsullied, pure, uncontaminated. That was kind of what they thought the West was. They didn't know. They thought it was this pure land, and it was. There were lots of mountains out there, lots of rivers, lots of lake, and there weren't people living on there. The idea of providence, that God or some divine presence watching over us and directing us to do, to move westward, that we'd be taken care of. Okay. So this is just really the idea of why we thought we should be moving westward. And like I said, most countries in Europe at that time were defined. There wasn't all this open space that we could just kind of explore and settle. And it was probably exciting for some people. Obviously, exploring is really exciting. So, what you would have done in here is some of the American values, would be like in this paragraph right here. The equality. It talks about in this last paragraph here. Providence is with us, and no earthly power can. We point to the everlasting truth in the first page of the Declaration. All men are created equal. That would be one of the American principles. The anti-king. We don't want rich people telling us how to live. Those are all, and these were things that, since our country was so new, remember our country is only about a little over 200 years old. Some countries in Europe are close to, 1,000, years old. So we are a relatively young country. So really what this is saying is, when you get down to the writing part here, if you don't come to democracy, democracy will come to you. And just the image of dropping bombs on people kind of gives you the visual that we think democracy is the best form of government, which may be true or not true. It just depends on your opinion. But I guess you have to ask the question, should we be forcing anyone to live a way they don't want to live? And that's really kind of the gist of kind of this political cartoon. So if you look down here, there's a writing prompt. So you certainly don't have to write if you don't want to. This is just be practice, because this might be something that you do on the social studies part of the test, or even actually the writing part. So it's just good practice. And up here it says, try to incorporate subject matter for this unit in the response to World War I, World War II, the Cold War, American foreign policy, the one we did yesterday. We did the Cold War, I think, last week. Just remember some of those themes about that. So do the best you can. Reread this. I know a lot of it's wordy. That's why, one thing you can do too is you can certainly underline words you don't know and look them up. Like I said, this was written in 1839. It is pretty wordy. You can probably tell from this document it's, 180 years old. It's kind of written in that old English. But some of the main points are things I just want you to pull out. If you find something you really like, just highlight it and, just do the best you can. So, but it is this idea, manifest destiny, that we are destined for greatness. Kind of God was looking over people when they are moving westward. All right, you guys, have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.